Hello, friend. We're back for another exciting episode of stuff Julia talks about. I am feeling particularly scared today to talk about this topic. One, because I don't have any notes with me, and usually I have notes with me when I'm talking about these kind of things. And two, I've definitely been receiving some threats and some intimidation, bullying, as I have been expressing my truth. And so, to me, that's a sign that I'm actually going in the right direction, and that it is beneficial for me to continue to express my truth, because it is my truth and no one can take that from me. No one can take my experience from me. No one can tell me that my experience didn't happen or that I don't have a right to express it. And that goes for you as well. So that's just a beautiful reminder to you. There has been, I believe, a bit of a misconception as to why I first started speaking out about this topic and expressing in the way that I had. And the misconception was that I was raging out, that I was on a rampage, that it was a personal vendetta, that I was just trying to bring someone down because I was heartbroken. I don't understand where that perception would have come from, and I can only assume that it was a projection. I'm not going to say there's not anger within me, but I would say that it's about 10%. And other than that, my desire to express comes very much from a very maternal, protective instinct. I would say that it is fear-based. Like 90% of it. And the reason that this is so hard for me to talk about is because it does bring up a lot of the memories, a lot of the trauma that I had experienced. And so as I express these things, for me, my drive and my inspiration is to serve and protect. And I believe that in me sharing my story, I can help inform women of the signs, the things to look for, so that they don't find themselves in a similar situation. Because like I've heard it mentioned, you will count the time wasted in years, not months. And I believe that life is way too precious to be wasting with people who do not love you, are not capable of loving you, and who want you in their life for the sole purpose to use you and discard you. So, someone had asked me a while back how narcissism is created, although specifically their question was, why are there so many narcissists in the world right now? And while I do certainly see that there is an influx in narcissistic behaviors, I just want to point out that there is still a difference between those who have narcissistic tendencies or have narcissistic traits and those who are full-blown like narcissistic personality disorder. So I just want to point out that there is that difference there, and I think we use the term narcissist often incorrectly, and this can be dangerous. But I also think it's very important for people to know the signs and to know what to actually look for, because this aspect is often the difference between whether or not this abusive person is actually going to change. Because those with narcissistic personality disorder, it is very rare that they actually change. So I'm going to try the best I can to explain my understanding of the mentality and how these people come into existence. And this is just my understanding. This is the information that I have learned, that I have taken on. You are, of course, open to your own interpretation of this information. And yeah, I can't force you to see my perspective, but this is just my perspective. So, a narcissist would have necessarily grown up in a very toxic environment, a very abusive environment. And more often than not, although not always, it does happen in childhood, that because their environment is so abusive and toxic, they actually create this split with their reality. They disassociate from their reality as a protective mechanism. And what this mechanism does is, in their brain, it tells them that they are separate from the world that they are viewing, that the reality that is before them is not really a part of their reality. They see themselves as being separate from it, but also better than it. So this is often what I've heard to being described as the narcissistic bubble. They essentially put themselves in this bubble. I've also heard it described as the consensus reality, the shared fantasy. So because of this very toxic environment, they've created this split, this disassociation from the world at large and themselves. And they often also have grown up in an environment where they would have been receiving very mixed messages. So on the one hand, it could have been that they were very, they were abused. They had this perception of themselves as being bad, or because shame is at the core of narcissistic personality disorder, it would be that I am bad rather than my behaviors are bad. So they would have taken on this mentality, and I use the word mentality because it is learned. It's not emotion-based. It's a mental way of seeing the world. And they have these mixed messages. So on the one hand, and it could be like they receive the negative side from one parent and they receive these positive messages from the other parent that tells them, okay, you're actually really good, you're a great human. But it's also, it's almost this false sense of empowerment or entitlement. And I think this can also come out. So it's not necessarily the case that one parent is giving them all positive and the other parent is giving them all negative, especially if the environment has a lot of addiction or drug abuse as well. It could be that when one or both of the parents is intoxicated, maybe that's when they are giving a lot of the heavy negative or even heavy positive, and then conversely when they're sober, maybe that's when they're really nice, or maybe when they're sober, that's when they're really mean. But either way, there is this mixed messaging of I'm a really bad human, the world is a bad place, it's really scary, and then on the other hand, like I'm really powerful, I'm really good, I do a lot of good things in the world. And I think especially with drug abuse, this would come out as the parent feels guilty about their addictive behaviors and how neglectful they are, how abusive they are, that they may then also give the child a false sense of entitlement, such as by giving them tasks that are that the child just shouldn't be doing. It's like they're giving them responsibilities that are too much for that child to handle. So as they're walking through this life with these mixed messages of I'm really good or I'm really bad, what they do is they choose to take on the the good mentality that I'm a really great person, I'm really good, and they kind of view themselves as better than the world because they've already had that split. There is necessarily a split with reality. And the interesting thing about this, because I think there's a misconception as well that it's usually an abusive mother that would cause a person to become abusive, and the research has suggested that that's actually not the case. It's usually a learned behavior from the father. So if a child witnesses their father being abusive towards their mother, that is when they are more likely to have that similar mentality, again, because it's a learned behavior. It's not necessarily because their mother was abusive towards them and now they have this anger and resentment towards women. It's that they witnessed someone else, and this is specifically, sorry, I should designate this, that this is more from a man's perspective. So it can be reversed if it's a woman who is the narcissist. But it's not necessarily the case that sorry, I lost my train of thought now. That the woman or the mother was abusive towards them. It's that they witnessed their father or another man be abusive towards women. And that's why, as a man, if you were growing up as a narcissist, that you would then be abusive towards other women. So when we look at the traits of narcissism, and I've heard a couple different numbers thrown around. I think in the DSM you need to have 5 of them to qualify. 7 is better. 9 is a number that I've heard thrown around as well. But the sense of like grandiosity, the sense of entitlement, a very clear lack of empathy towards the people that they are abusing. And this one's really interesting because it took me a while to actually catch on that this was present in my own life, because narcissists are very good at something that's called performative empathy. So they will give the appearance of having empathy, of caring about other people, but it's only, it's a performance. So as soon as the doors are closed, everyone's gone home, they very much step into that abusive mentality again of, I am better than you, I deserve more than you, I can do whatever I want to you, which is that sense of entitlement, grandiosity. They have a very superficial view of people and the world, in the sense that they often have a drive towards status, success, or money, or attractiveness. And even if they themselves don't have those qualities right off the bat, they are going to gravitate towards people that do have those qualities because they think it makes them look better. They chronically seek validation and entitlement, or that's not what I meant to say. Validation and admiration. So I think this is also why narcissism is so prevalent on the internet right now, because it is so easy for people to just hop on and, make a video and get a like and a share. And I've seen this in terms of people just constantly talking about themselves. And I think there's a very clear distinction between, those who want to be in the spotlight because they really want to serve humanity, they really want to help other people, and those who just want attention for themselves. And one of the key ways that you can see this offline as well is that they often have this tendency of love bombing. So gift giving is one of the ways that they will do this. But if they give gifts, if they give you anything at all, they will constantly remind you that they've done something nice for you. or they'll tell other people about it. So they want other people to know how nice, how good they are. It's not something that they'll just do in private or let it go, but it's something that they do for the sole purpose of making themselves look good. There's this aspect of like arrogance that I am better than you, that they often see themselves, and I think again this comes from the idea of being like the golden child, that they were given this false sense of like entitlement, or this false idea that they actually are better. So they walk around the world or throughout the world with this mentality that they are actually better than other people. They might see themselves as like the chosen one. They might see themselves as a gift to this earth. And this can be really dangerous because it often shows up as devaluing other people's perspectives and opinions. And you will especially see this come out when you disagree with them, when you try to express your own opinions or stand your own ground, that they'll kind of just brush you off. They don't really see it as being valuable. They don't really see it as having worth. And they don't really see it as something that is just worth their time and effort. They also have a tendency towards rage as well. And this often, again, comes out when you don't agree with them. So, because they, at their core, have a shame wound, they are constantly seeking to fill this wound with like the validation, and they're essentially trying to create a stronger sense of who they are, but it's called like an individuation process. So they were never able to create a strong connection with their mother figure. And so what they do in life is they go through life seeking out this connection, this intimacy, but they aren't ever actually able to fulfill that need because they also have a very strong fear of that intimacy. And so even though they may talk about how loving they are or how much people do love them, and they might again express like the love bombing, but when it actually comes to close, deep, like intimate connection, it can be very superficial on the emotional level. They seek often very like sexual based intimacy, but in terms of like long lasting, deep, like emotional connection, it's very hard for them to maintain that. And again, they're good at faking it. They might fake the empathy. They might fake that they care for a while. And this is why it can be challenging to actually tell the difference. Narcissists by their nature are very charming. And one of the most beautiful pieces of advice that I've learned recently is to be very wary of people who are charming. This is common both in narcissists and in psychopaths. And it's, again, that protective mechanism that they are only portraying one side of themselves. They are only portraying the side that they think you are going to like. So they have a very refined vision in terms of what your vulnerabilities are and how they can actually manipulate you. So they know, like right off the bat, what they can tell you to make you like them. And this is why they are often very well liked. They are often admired by other people. They are often very, people look up to them. They are sought after, in part because they give this very strong appearance of being powerful. They give this appearance of like status or money, but I really need to what's the word? Exemplify, magnify, just point out the word appearance, that they're actually not that powerful. They're not really as, they're just, they don't have as much power, and they're not as well liked as they portray themselves to be. They often talk themselves up. So they'll talk about how great their achievements are, how powerful other people view them as being. But then when you talk to those other people, or you kind of look into or dig into their story, it doesn't really add up. And the other important thing to note is that their stories and the words they say are often very different from their actions. So the tendency to rage that I was talking about earlier, the fragile ego, they don't like criticism. They don't like it when you have an opinion that's different than theirs. So part of the way that they gain that sense of identity, or what's the word I'm looking for? Not ego. Esteem. They esteem themselves by constantly seeking validation from other people, but they also intend to colonize their victims. So you having your own desires, beliefs, perspectives around the world is very much a threat to them. They want you to see the world from their viewpoint because that validates who they are. And if you don't agree with them, they will in fact bully you. They will in fact terrorize you. They will in fact beat you back into submission. Maybe not physically, but mentally and psychologically speaking, this is why they are so abusive, because they have a very fragile ego in the sense that they can't handle criticism. They can't handle it when you tell them that their behavior is abusive, or that their behavior is unacceptable, or that you're offended by their behavior. And this is often when you see a lot of the gaslighting tactics. You often see a lot of manipulation. You often see a lot of projections that they'll turn it around on you. Like, say if you're expressing, hey, I really didn't like it when you spoke to me that way. They'll turn it around and say, yeah, well, you were speaking that way to me, or you did that first. Or it's like this very clear lack of responsibility for their own behaviors, and they often will place that blame outwards as a way of distracting you from the fact that they are actually abusing you. What else can I say? So they will sometimes talk about equality. And this is really interesting because they may describe you as being an equal. And people will sometimes be drawn to narcissists because of, again, their powerful, the image that they have of being powerful or successful. And they may lure you in under the pretense that if you follow me, if you join me on this journey, that you will also gain power and success, or money, or love, or whatever it is that you are seeking out. The important thing to note here is that when they say the word equal, that does not mean eye to eye. That does not mean horizontal. Equal to them is not like this. They see the world from a very top-down approach. And you can often see this in their philosophy, see this in the way that they describe themselves or the situation. So they are always above you. And they will do everything in their power to make sure that it stays that way. So even though they may lure you in under the pretense that you will be more successful for having them in your life, they will never actually let you surpass them or even be equal to them. And this is really interesting. When I learned this fact that they actually get a dopamine hit every time you fail, every time they see you fail, they get enjoyment from that. They get a sense of pleasure from that, which is why I believe they strive so hard to keep you down, why they are so frequent in their abusive tactics. And even though on the one hand they may like lift you up to a degree, this is actually a part of the trauma bonding process. So a trauma bond is something that happens when someone is abusive towards you, but they are also the one to help calm your nervous system down after that abuse happens. So what this does is it essentially creates this chemical cocktail in your body that tells you to be afraid, tells you it's like a release of adrenaline, cortisol. So it tells you that this person or this situation is dangerous, but because they are also the one to maybe comfort you afterwards, or love bombing is also something that reinforces this trauma bond, because they also provide you with some kind of a stimulation that then calms your nervous system, then you have this release of oxytocin or dopamine, and it creates this very strong what is referred to as a trauma bond. And this is why it is often so hard to break from or leave a relationship with a narcissist, because it is very much their intention to keep you locked in, to keep you a part of their circle, to keep you with them for as long as they can, because they are looking for narcissistic supply. So this is the word that is, or the words, the term that's used to refer to as like attention. They're looking for attention, again, to build themselves up, to feel that sense of self-esteem. They're constantly seeking that validation from other people. And where was I going with this again? But, oh right, the discarding part. So they only want to keep you for as long as you are useful to them. When you no longer become useful to them, they will discard you without the blink of an eye. And this is also very specific to narcissism, because if they don't have a intention to discard you, then it's not true narcissism. I feel like I want to circle back around for a second. So, it's interesting for me to see this. So the worldview that they live under, and the fact that they often try to indoctrinate people into their way of viewing the world. And they do have this sort of godlike persona as well. So they might even say words like, you know, I am God and you are God, as a way of giving you that similar false sense of entitlement or empowerment that they were given as a child or as they were growing up. And this can be very confusing. And I think this often actually distorts people's view of the world in a way that can be very toxic. And in my own life, what I recognized was that this actually cut me off from my own spirituality and my own connection to God. And it wasn't until someone else showed me this or brought this to my attention, that this way of thinking is very egotistical. And I know even as you're hearing it now, you might think, well, obviously, like, who says I am God? And that's not ego-based. But it was something that I was indoctrinated into, that way of viewing the world. And while I understand, it made sense to me at the time, in the sense that we do have the light of God within us. We do have, we have the essence of God within us. But since that time, since I've now separated myself from the cult that I was in, and I do use the word cult very intentionally, I've been able to now see that it's not I am God, you are God. It's that we are God. We are co-creating. And if we live from the mentality of I am this and you are this, it's still just very ego-based. And it's hard for us to really live from the heart when we're so focused on ourselves. We are all very connected with each other, with the world, with the energy and the spirit of life, I believe. And when we're operating from the ego, when we're operating from that sense of this is who I am, this is like my purpose in the world, this is what I'm going to do, that to me is a sign of like power and control. And so I just think it's very important to recognize, and this is, again, was my process. This is something that I came to see as a result of living from this other perspective for so long, that my worldview isn't about me. It's not about what I can do. It's about getting out of my own way so that God can be expressed through me. I truly believe that being in this body it's a gift, but it's something that I need to be humble to, that reality. And when I start talking about like my own power and how successful I am, or how like influential I am, I think that in and of itself cuts me off from truly connecting with my own divinity and truly connecting with the divinity of God. Because again, it's about getting out of my own way. I am a vessel, but I am not that energy in and of itself. And I just think I don't know why that needed to come through, but I felt like it was important to note that. So one last piece that I want to end this off on today is that, so when I started this video, I was talking about why I think it's important for a person to be able to recognize the signs so that they can tell if they are actually in a relationship or know someone, or maybe it's a work relationship, a parent, family member, whatever, to recognize the signs for what they are. Because like I said, people with full-blown narcissistic personality disorder do not want to change. They like the power that they have over people. They are very resistant to actually doing things according to anyone else's way of doing things, because again, their ego is so fragile. So even though they may give the appearance that they want to change, or they might make small steps to suggest that they are changing, they are almost constantly stuck in this loop, this process of trying to individuate, trying to find that real connection, but they just can't. It's their brains haven't developed in a way that they can actually create that connection with other people. So it's kind of this sick cycle that they find themselves in, where they are constantly seeking this connection, but they can never actually create that. And when I was first starting to learn about narcissism, I was watching these different videos that was suggesting that maybe it can be healed. Maybe like if they want to change, then yes, it can actually be changed. And at the time, I was receiving information that the person that I knew did want to change, that they were open to doing things differently. But what I came to realize in these videos, so when they're talking about the fact that you can actually change these narcissistic tendencies, they're not talking about the people with narcissistic personality disorder. They're talking about the person who, essentially you or I, if you were in a relationship with someone or you had a close proximity with this person, they are talking about the fact that you're the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time around. And if you spend most of your time around a narcissist, you will necessarily start to take on some of those qualities and characteristics. So you are the one that can actually change your behaviors. You can start to come back to who you are. And this is why I think it's so important, because until you recognize just how much you have been indoctrinated or colonized by a narcissist, it's hard to actually begin to look at yourself and the ways that you have taken on their mentality and their behaviors in life. And if you truly want to heal from that experience, that abusive experience, which I can only hope and imagine that you do desire for yourself, if you do truly want to heal, you have to start looking at how you began to take on those behaviors, that mentality, because even though your expressions may not have been to the same degree, or they may not have been as consistent across the board. So with a narcissist, they will act that way in all of their relationships. Maybe you only acted that way in your relationship with them. But there's still a lot of like guilt and shame that would need to be processed as a result of that. And if you don't process that guilt, that shame, the anger, resentment that you may have felt being in a relationship with them, then it is pretty much guaranteed that you will continue to gravitate towards people who have those similar characteristics until you are willing to heal that within yourself. So if that is the only thing that you take away from this video here today, I hope that that offers you some value, because there is hope for you. But you have to have that willingness. So that, again, is the defining factor. If you don't have that willingness, then that may be an indication that you might also have narcissistic personality disorder. And I just don't wish that upon anyone. Yeah, so I don't know if that fully answered the question of why there's so many narcissists in the world right now. Essentially, it's a learned behavior. And it's very heavily rewarded in our society today. I was listening to something last night that said if a person were to write a book on narcissism, it would essentially be like, what that book would tell you is essentially how to succeed in the New World Order. So this is why we have like so much capitalism, so much focus on monetary success, of like being powerful, because of these traits and because of how just how learned they are and how ingrained they are in our society. Yeah. But there's hope. And I think the more we learn to truly come back to our heart, come back to God, come back to the deeper essence of who we are, and connecting with Mother Earth as well. So the more that we're able to focus on other people, their needs, how to really truly be of service, what other people need, other people's emotions, the more hope there is for the society right now. And it's something that, I mean, it's a journey that we're all going through and in the process of understanding. But I really just think that that's the true message and takeaway, is that we need to just focus on what we can do for others rather than what we can have others do for us. So I'm gonna leave this here today. Thanks for tuning in, beautiful humans. All right, signing off. Satnam, truth is my name. And thank you for this opportunity to release and to express, because like I said, I was actually procrastinating on making this video for like a solid week actually since I made my first video. So I hope there was something in here valuable. If you have any more questions, any more things that you would like to know, anything that you don't agree with, or personal information that you have that you would love to share, let me know. And yeah, okay, bye friends.